Oh, I'm sorry. I literally asked if you had an intro.
Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers.
Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5. Folks, I adore Kevin Smith. Huge fan. Started proper in 2012 with Fat Man on Batman. Utterly hooked me. I mean, Fat Man on Batman before it was Fat Man Beyond that it is today, and of course that led me down the track of the films and then the rest of everything. I've seen him before in Evening with Kevin Smith. By the Superman, which leads you to the Superman Lives of it all. Of course, you've seen the Stan Lee interview. The point being, Kevin Smith, to me, he's a truly beloved personality. But for our purposes tonight, we're looking at him as a filmmaker. And I feel Kevin Smith is not only the consummate storyteller, but that each film of his reveals a little of the Kevin Smith story we all know so well, thanks to those Evening with Kevin Smiths and all those supplemental stories and everything we know and love about the guy, and books and this and that and comic book men, you name it. There's so many lovely podcasts and ad infinitum. But again, focusing on the films, I think if you look hard enough at any film, especially Kevin Smith film, you're going to learn a little bit about the guy and see some of that story present itself. So what we're going to do is go through the cinematic catalog to celebrate the man's 50th birthday right. Why? Because we love the guy and the mark he's made, not just on us, but on Hollywood too.
All right. Sorry about that, Dragon. When I asked if you had an intro, I literally that was poor communication on my part.
I mean, again, usually you say Tiki here, and then I would.
No, I know. I apologize. I didn't mean to throw you under the bus.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kevin Smith, folks. So Dragon, Fat Man on Batman was your first exposure to Kevin Smith?
Well, that's the thing. So I'd seen him in bits and pieces. I had that DVD of the Stan Lee interview, and I'd seen him on bonus features. Like he was on the '89 stuff.
Right, but you hadn't watched any of his films or anything?
Not. Okay. I saw a little bit of Mallrats, but not really outside of that. Really,
that's really interesting, Dragon. That's really interesting because I am coming at it from almost an opposite perspective, where of course, I was someone where I knew about Clerks for years, and when I eventually watched Clerks in high school, it was just like one of those transformative experiences for me, as it is with a lot of people. Sure, it is a bunch of dick and fart jokes, but there's something to that movie. There's something to the rhythm of it, to the message that it entails. I think there's a lot of deeper layers to Clerks, especially when it comes to Kevin Smith's life and the story of him as a filmmaker and how it connects to that. That being said, Dragon, I got to admit, his filmography is pretty eclectic, and I respect the man, but I don't know. I feel like there's more of his films that I kind of don't really jive with than that I do jive with, but I feel like it makes him more of an interesting filmmaker. Having said all that, Dragon, I am kind of in the same realm as you, where the bread and butter of Kevin Smith for me before the podcasts was Evening with Kevin Smith. I mean, Evening with Kevin Smith, I got to admit, Dragon, that was one of my motivations for me to talk for a living, to get into podcasting, even though it wasn't a podcast. I was just enthralled by this guy's ability to, just weave this narrative and just kind of have all these little jokes. And it was almost a stand-up comedy routine, but it was more informative than that.
Yeah, because he doesn't really tell jokes,
Right. I mean, he has, but he will have running themes that will connect to the story that are funny. But I just feel like Kevin Smith, especially through his podcast, his podcast is nowadays, I feel like far beyond his filmography, which all due respect to his filmography, he did a lot of good things for independent film for sure. But I feel like his work on the podcast is just legendary. I really do. I feel like there wouldn't be a space for geeks like you and me nearly as accepting online if not for Kevin Smith's work in the podcast realm.
I mean, the man is the podfather for a reason. Let's be honest.
I mean, he literally pretty much wrote the book on it. So yeah, so I guess appropriately, Dragon, we're here to do a podcast on the films kind of,
Yes.
kind of goes full circle like
I
that.
mean, that's the thing. I mean, again, my favorite Kevin Smith, and it sounds like your favorite Kevin Smith as well, is Kevin Smith, the storyteller, which of course dovetails into the podcast quite nicely. And again, that's kind of what draws, it's kind of what, if not draws you to him, it kind of keeps the longevity alive. He's been in podcasting nearly as long as he has in film. But again, with the evening wits and the storytelling, you don't have the storytelling without the story, which again comes from the filmmaking. So it's kind of nice. They all nicely tie into each other. You can't have one without the other. It's a fun little circle.
All right, you want to just dive right into the films?
Yeah, so folks, we're going to keep this quite simple. Going to try it again. There's like roughly, there are basically 13 films at the moment, of course, some on the horizon. But basically, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give our thoughts on the film. We're going to assume you've seen them for the most part, or at least have heard about, or at least have at least know a little bit about them. We're going to basically give our thoughts on them and also kind of like examine them a little bit. What they say about Kevin Smith, what we learn about Kevin Smith, again, kind of how the man's narrative of 50 years of life kind of goes on, as it were. Okay, so let's start with 1994, Clerks.
Okay. I think for me, the biggest quality of Clerks that I still look back on to this day is how raw it is. I love the natural friendship between Dante and Randall. One of my favorite moments in the entire Kevin Smith filmography is Randall calling out Dante at the end of the movie. And I love that these two characters, like Randall is, comfortable and self-aware of the spot he is in his life, whereas Dante wants more, but he's kind of pompous about it to make up for it. I feel like right away, those are just two instantly relatable, instantly iconic characters. And then you have Jay and Bob. And Dragon, Jay and Bob, it's not talked about enough how kind of oddly sinister those two are in the first Clerks movie. I mean, they're not antagonists by any means, but they definitely have an edge to them that they kind of, Jay and Bob at this point are pretty much cartoon characters. And
it's so funny if you look at the culture, Tiki. Again, they're drug dealers, but of course, the way the world has grown these days, I mean, it's like not all bad.
Right, but what I'm saying is that at the time when Clerks was made, I feel like Jay was almost more of kind of like a shady rapscallion than he was like a lovable loser. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, with Clerks, there's of course, I don't necessarily think some of the relationship stuff in that movie has aged particularly well. I think the whole section of the, let's just say the
necrophilia, you mean?
Yes, that's. I didn't want to say it, Dragon, but yes, I think honestly that is probably like I will probably like skip over that whole section the next time I watch it. But it still gave birth to a lot of classic Star Wars debates. The independent contractors of it all. That's almost like a sticking point in Star Wars philosophy these days.
One could argue we don't get Finn working on on Star Killer Base in
Sure.
Force Awakens without that joke in Clerks. One could argue connect the dots there.
But I mean, overall with Clerks, I really truly believe that the heart and soul of that movie and why people keep coming back to it is for Dante and Randall. I think that Randall, like I said, I think Randall calling out Dante on his shit at the end of the movie is like the ultimate kind of generational wake-up call to get up off your ass and do something about your life. And I will always kind of hold the movie dear for that reason.
Yes, Clerks, of course, inspired by Linklater's Richard Linklater's Slackers. Kind of made a huge impact on Kevin Smith, and he basically kind of makes his indie movie with kind of as a day in the life of Clerks. A little bit of Spike Lee in there too, a little bit like the 24-hour cycle of an indie movie. Okay, we start from finish. I'm not supposed to be here to that whole runner. And what's great is, Kevin Smith, he really put on the line when you look at this movie. He sold his comics, his whole collection. He amassed massive credit card. He risked massive credit card decks. He put like a whole movie on cards and everything. And then a flood hits New Jersey. Basically, half the stuff he was going to sell gets damaged, but thankfully there's like an insurance check or something, basically like a FEMA check of some kind. Point being, it was all on the line. And I think this first film, as you kind of mentioned with Dante and Randall, again, it speaks to young Kevin Smith's life. He put a lot of himself in that movie. it's his workplace. Literally, he's working at that Quick Stop
Mm-hmm.
and RST Video, and he is Dante. I mean, I know he fancies himself a bit of a Randall initially, but he is a Dante. It's Kevin Smith. What he
So
proves
in the end, that call out is basically Kevin Smith calling himself out.
Exactly.
And the movie is Randall's plea to take charge of his life.
Absolutely. Basically, they're both sides of Kevin Smith. Randall is the more vocal side. So it's so weird looking at it now. If you want to go all the way back here, where we are now, 50 years later, is that it's well, I know it hasn't been 50 years since '94, but you know what I mean. Just in the 50-year lifespan, is that Kevin Smith at this point in time, again, now he is more Randall than ever before. More like happy-go-lucky Randall, but still a Randall nonetheless. He's the more vocal.
Sure.
He'll call his younger self out on things, and this is very much kind of the evening with Kevin Smith as Dante, kind of calling himself out then versus now in a sense. And that's what I'm saying. So what we prove with Kevin Smith, the filmmaker, is he proves that even with the bare minimum, just with characters, dialogue, and a setting, he can get the job done. And honestly, the end results of Clerks, really, it speaks for itself. It does. And I feel one thing to note here before we go, this is going to tie into everything else. One of the things I love most about Kevin Smith is the man is kind of like a beacon of truth. The man is all about honesty. And I feel that what we kind of represent in Clerks is that there's kind of that New Jersey honesty that is kind of captured on film right, like we see on comic book man. It's like these Jersey boys, they're very much about they'll call it as they see it. Sometimes not so nicely, but they'll call it as they see it. Unapologetically, they'll say, "I don't appreciate your ruse, ma'am." That whole angle of it. Like,
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
And that really defines Kevin Smith. He cements himself with this movie after that, and doing stuff like that. He cements himself as the everyman version of your indie mechas, like your Robert Rodriguez's or your Quentin Tarantino's. He's the everyman version. He's the achievable version of that. He's the Slackers 2.0 version of Robert Rodriguez. One could argue the man champions raw humanity and becomes an indie titan because of that. Which brings us to
Mallrats.
Yes, 95. Good year.
All right, Dragon. I'm going to admit something to you. The next three that we're going to be talking about, I'm not really a fan of any of them.
Starting with Mallrats or after Mallrats?
Starting with Mallrats.
Really? You're not crazy about
Mallrats through Dogma, I'm kind of spotty on it, man. We'll get into it.
Interesting.
They both definitely have a lot of good things going for it, or I'm sorry, all three of them have good things going for them. But they also have some major things dragging them down. So with Mallrats, of course, the big thing we need to talk about is the fact that this was the first big studio system. Hold on, Drag. We have a comment by Claude Karinga here. You can go ahead and answer this. You know more about this than I do, Dragon.
I'm absolutely up to date on Kevin Smith.
So go ahead.
Okay, so Claude is asking, what are your thoughts on the upcoming Kevin Smith Netflix He-Man series and some of the voice cast that was announced? I wanted to bring this up when we did our thing with Captain Logan, but I wasn't able to get in there because of your whole She-Ra thing. But anyway, I'll talk about it here.
Oh, God. Oh, don't remind me.
So here's the thing. So
we will never be on Geekvolution again because of that fucking She-Ra
No. It's just that look. I don't think it's that big a deal. Anyway, so the He-Man thing. Yes, Kevin Smith, he's doing a He-Man show with another really big He-Man fan, and it sounds like it's really coming together nicely. I'm looking forward. I'm not really a He-Man guy either, but of course, Kevin Smith being attached to it, they're saying the animation looks very promising. Again, with the She-Ra show, they've been doing some He-Man kind of. It's like what they're doing with the Carmen Sandiego show, but with some of the other older properties. They're kind of doing that on Netflix these days.
Right.
And they have Mark Hamill playing Skeletor. They have Chris Woods playing He-Man. They have an A+ cast, Tiki, like fantastic people are in this thing. I'm looking very forward to it. Kevin Smith's been dropping some really great details. It makes me want to look into He-Man, which I never thought was possible. It's like, oh my God, he's really hyping this thing up. So it sounds like it's gonna be good. Anyway, on the Mallrats. So yes, so Mallrats is kind of like the second product syndrome for Kevin Smith. It's sort of like the big can you make it or break it with your second product? And yes, it is a studio. It's a foray into the studio.
I feel like everything that works about Mallrats also worked about Clerks, and everything that doesn't work about Mallrats is the byproduct of the studio system. Does that make sense?
I hear that, and and I think you're right about that too. Yes, there is some there's a little bit of studio meddling, and I don't know if you've heard the tales or not. Like they told them to cut out some things, like some of these jokes will never work, and they end up in something about Mary, and of course they have mass acclaim, stuff like
Oh
that. Like
God.
they're Mallrats. I forget if this is. I want to say Mallrats is the only film Kevin Smith hasn't edited, and that's why Mallrats is like 3 cuts of Mallrats technically.
Mm. So with Mallrats, I think that the pop culture humor and the typical like Kevin Smith like pop culture observations, the Stan Lee of it all, that's all fucking fantastic. That's all really on point. That's why we go back to the movie. I also think that it's a natural evolution from the convenience store to the mall setting. I like that, and I feel like the mall setting is maybe one of the things that the studio system actually benefited from.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what I hate about Mallrats Dragon and why I struggle to rewatch it. I can't stand the love triangle stuff, and I especially can't stand the dating game stuff.
Okay, that what make if you don't like the dating game, I guess that I understand why you don't like Lost. That's the big third act. If you don't like that,
Dragon, the
the
dating
third
game
movie.
stuff for me drags on so long. It feels so hokey. It doesn't feel like natural Kevin Smith. It feels like a typical like big wacky third act finale of a Hollywood romantic comedy. You know what I mean? And compare that to the third act of Clerks, where the third act of Clerks is very much the emotional catharsis. Whereas the third act of Mallrats, it just kind of just loses all meaning for me at that point. I kind of just tune out.
I hear your point again. I think it chalks up to exactly what you're talking about, Tiki. It is kind of like the studio had notes, and this was like again so early in his career, Kevin Smith really couldn't fight the notes. And
Uh-huh.
again, I don't know if I forget if the dating game was necessarily his ad or not. At the very least, if the dating game was there, I don't think it was the third act. The point being, the studio probably pressed on certain things, like we should have this in here, and a compromise was made. I'm sure. So here's what I like. Let me circle back. Here's what I really like about Mallrats. So Mallrats is very much a cult classic, and I think the way it came out,
Sure.
it was kind of didn't have any fanfare. I think it becomes a beloved kind of classic over the years. And a lot of people like Mallrats. I mean, I'm there in school. My teachers love Mallrats, man. Mallrats was, that's what I'm saying. My English teacher liked Mallrats.
Oh God.
Anyway, the point being, there was a fan base for Mallrats. It's a lot of fun, and the thing with Mallrats for me, the reason I really like, I like you can kind of tune in midway and kind of still have a ball with it. I can tune in without watching the first act, and like, oh my god, I'm having so much fun, just like looking at us run around this mall and just having, because the
But
setting
that's the
is
thing
just
for me.
so.
That's the thing. I feel like the second act is where the movie shines, and that's kind of why I don't think that it really fits together as a whole. Because you're right, there is a lot of boring setup in the first act as well.
I don't
So
necessarily think
really,
it's
I think it's the
boring, but I
second
think you're
act.
right. Two outshines it.
I think it's the second act stuff in the mall that people keep coming back to. I really don't think it's a perfect movie by any means.
Oh, sure. I mean, again, as you said, again, the mall setting is the gold there. Again, it's kind of like we're upgrading the clerks. You're getting a little bit more of a
Yeah.
budget and like the grandioseness of okay, we very relatable setting. Everyone's been to a mall in their life. Unfortunately, I feel the next generation might have some issues with that. But the point being, our generation we had malls, and it's just that we're going a little bit more heightened in the comedy, a little bit more broad. And this is going to be important when we get to the next movie. So remember that. So the point being, again, probably per the studio, it's like we're dumbing down like this as you're talking about Jay and Silent Bob, like a little bit more of like a little vague, sinister, little if not sinister, maybe a little cynical edge to Jay and Silent Bob. But here, it's a little bit more cartoony. They're grappling
Sure.
hooks and
Sure.
everything. It's adorable. I like that
Right.
though. I don't mind that. We have
No, I don't mind it either, and of course that is the
yeah,
foundation for their characters now.
yeah.
I'm just saying it's a fact. I just think it's a cool observation that they were more shady in the first Clerks movie, and it's something that never gets talked about.
Yeah, we have like again, like you have really, of course, some great elements too. Like Jason Lee makes his debut, and Jason Lee's a lot of fun as well. Speaking of the other Lee, of course, the first proper Stan Lee cameo slash role, because again, it's more of a role than a cameo, and that's
Hmm.
what's kind of cool
Hmm.
about it. This is before this, you had the Incredible Hulk TV movie. So this is Stan Lee. This is what forged Stan Lee and Kevin Smith's lifelong relationship, which is so
Aw.
beautiful to me. He gave him his first break. Stan Lee was given lines in a role. Like he made Stan Lee's actor dreams come true, and that's kind of beautiful. That's why I always had that fondness for him. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I'm just gonna have to agree. I like the dating game third act. I thought it was kind of a fun set piece and throwback to when they would do things in the mall like bands and stuff and that sort of
Aw.
thing. So I could buy it that way. I'll admit if you really want to look at it under a microscope, yeah, maybe is it the strongest or heck no, but it's enjoyable to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so point being, Kevin Smith, he's entering the big leagues with this because he's doing a Universal picture, which of course is why we have so much trouble getting a Mallrats sequel, because of like it's a studio picture. And they're very chinchy with with the rights and everything. And Kevin Smith, he gets a taste of the Hollywood system for sure, which is the gateway to Hollywood as he goes forward, which kind of brings us to the next film.
Right. So Chasing Amy.
97.
I respect this movie a lot more than I actively enjoy watching it. Does that make sense?
I would agree with that for the most part. I'm kind of in the same boat.
I feel like at the time it had a lot of meaningful stuff to say. Yeah. Having said that, I don't like, and this isn't even me trying to be all SJW Dragon, because I don't swing that way. This is just me just kind of like, society has kind of evolved, and I think the whole like, hey, I'm going to swing a lesbian, I don't.
Yeah, it's not as controversial today as it was then. That's the difference. It's not like it's.
However, having said that, I do think it has a lot of valuable things to say about relationships and codependency, and like thinking that you found the right person even though they might not be the right person. And I think that this is my favorite Jay and Bob.
Really? Well, of course, Silent Bob has like the really fantastic monologue in this.
This is my favorite Jay and Bob because I feel like Jay is grounded, but not a cartoon character. You know what I mean? Like, and of course, yeah, it's absolutely the best Silent Bob moment. Like, no fucking question about it.
I have one other contender, but this might be the best use of Jay and Silent Bob for sure. This is a contender for like the best use of them and integration into the movie, because they're not used too much, not too less.
They're not used too much. They don't overstay their welcome, but they do have a very meaningful thing to contribute to the movie. I honestly think this is the best use of Jay and Silent Bob. I really do.
I think you're. I could absolutely. I hear your argument on that. I would be inclined to agree, because again, it's just the right amount. It's like it's the Goldilocks effect. It's just right.
I think the black and white filmmaking is actually fairly striking, and Kevin Smith always jokes that his style is that he has no style, but I honestly would argue that I would like to see more black and white films from him, because I think his black and white films do kind of like have an air of like an air of authenticity to them. And I do think that all the characters in Chasing Amy are really likable and down to earth and relatable. I guess, Dragon, my problem for me with Chasing Amy is it's really it kind of comes down to pacing.
We kind of hit. I don't know, because I think the pacing, again, with the whole Jay and Silent Bob, again, I think the pacing is, for the most part, is just right. By the same token, I think maybe we extend like the realization out a little. We draw the realizations out a little bit in Act 2.
That's like, what I'm saying.
We go to the game, and then we go to the game, and I believe Holden. Yeah, it's Holden McNeil.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Holden, like, he calls her out at the game on the whole thing. That whole thing, maybe we could have. I don't know. It feels like we kind of. He's already sniffing it out. We couldn't have had a conversation outside, like going to a whole nother set piece, that sort of thing. Maybe it drags the hair for me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know.
Interesting.
So honestly, I can't really. Honestly, Dragon, I feel like if I were to revisit this movie, I feel like I would get a lot out of it, and I need to revisit it.
I'd recommend it, because let me tell you something about this. I don't know if you knew about this beforehand, right? The thing they're doing here is that this is a personal parallel, as many of them are, to Kevin Smith's life, and that. He had a relationship with the lead actress, with Joey Lauren Adams in real life, as I believe you know. And the thing is, like, I forget if it was like before this movie or like during this movie. I mean, I guess before, because it's written into the movie. He had his relationship trouble with her. They broke up, and again, it was for kind of the reasons. The theme of the movie being kind of sexuality and insecurity, male insecurity about sexuality and experimentation. And that's so basically Holden is an analog for Kevin Smith. Again, if the facial hair wasn't a dead giveaway, he's kind of the analog for Kevin Smith. He's a little think about it. Holden is a comic book artist who's a little disillusioned with the big leagues, which Kevin Smith was with Mallrats. He was a little he got into the big leagues, but they're kind of giving him notes. And he had to dumb down his work with the way he sees it. He kind of had to dumb things down a little bit with Blunt Man and Chronic being the fill-ins from Mallrats, the shenanigans in Mallrats, which again, for us, not a bad thing, because again, hey, look at Jan's up. Oh, ain't that cute? Them doing stuff, just kind of being all silly as it goes forward. But the X factor to the film for me is that these the conversations in this one, of course, the Jaws scene being the big go-to, the very Jaws-esque, like the sexual injuries, like, oh yeah, chip the tooth during that, and like, oh yeah, the whole like, comparing the scars from doing stuff. These were conversations you didn't see in the movies at that time, like proposing a threesome to fix an unconventional love triangle that doesn't work. I mean, you don't see that in every movie. It's like he proposed it and it didn't work, and it's not a happy ending. That's what I'm saying. At the '90s and kind of the romantic comedies, this was unheard of. This was this was crazy. And again, Kevin Smith going with the relatable flaws to the human ego, with the finger cuffs of it all. Like you're not the first, you're not special. In the wake up call, hey, people experiment sexually in life. It's not the end of the world. Like, don't let that get in the way of a good thing. Life doesn't always have the Hollywood ending. And again, it ends with, oh, that's just some guy I knew. Like, how bold is that? Like, oh, it's just, again, that's kind of your BoJack ending, Tiki. That's the DNA of your BoJack ending. Like, who is he? That whole thing.
All right. Good stuff. Yeah. Okay, next up, Dogma Dragon. Yes. I am all the fuck over. This is like the most mixed I am on any Kevin Smith movie. My opinions on this movie are all the fuck over the place.
Really?
I think parts of it are really clever. I do think that Jay and Bob work pretty well in it. I just think other parts of it are just really kind of over the top and frankly kind of stupid.
So,
and like this movie is like a weird mix of like really, really, really cutting social satire, really effective cutting social satire, and also just frankly really like some of the most dumb juvenile humor in Kevin Smith's entire filmography. And that is the disconnect that I have with it.
Yeah, I mean, compared to like Jay and Silent Bob's Strike Back, I don't think it's that juvenile. If you really like,
No. But the thing about Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back is that it's not trying to do anything deep. We'll get to Jay and Bob Strike Back. But my problem with Dogma is that it's kind of trying to be too many different things.
Well, let me say this. Of course, Dogma. Dogma for me is a personal favorite. Honestly, I really like Dogma. Maybe honestly, I think maybe might be Kevin Smith's best work. At least, I mean, from the ones that for me, taste wise, I think it might be the Kevin Smith's best work, because I feel that to me it feels perfectly balanced in many regards. I mean, so of course, Dogma, Kevin Smith, he's having a crisis of faith, and of course, relating his real life to the films. He's had a crisis of faith growing up Catholic, and he's kind of had questions, and basically as he grew up, it's in adulthood, it's like kind of questioning the logic of the myth of it all, as it were. And it's fun. I didn't know about it, so I did a little mini deep dive. Like, he's been promising Dogma since Clerks. At the end of Clerks, again, we should talk about this. The askew Kevin Smith kind of beating the MCU slightly with the View Askew-verse.
Yeah.
But again, it was inspired by Marvel, the whole crossover appeal. So again, it's kind of like the snake eating its own tail. But you know what I mean. The point being is, he promised like Jay and Silent Bob will return in Dogma. He's been promising that at the end of Clerks. It's kind of cool. But so Dogma for me, it's kind of this irreverent comedy, but also kind of a thoughtful deconstruction of kind of religion and faith in many regards. I think the strongest element of the film for me, the thing that sells me instantly on the movie is I'm sold on Affleck and Damon as these wandering angels, these fallen angels who are just kind of like
Affleck and Damon are easily the best part of the movie.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, from there, like, a movie starts there, and I'm like, okay, I'm already invested. I'm sold. I want to see what happens to these guys. Like, they turn Lady Aberlin from Mr. Rogers. They steer her down the wrong path. That's awesome. She's they get a nun to steal money. It's awesome. Anyway. So my point is, like, I really like this this journey that they go on, kind of the little mundane conversations they have, just kind of like pondering life and existence, and basically they're trying to re-enter heaven. Think about where we're at now. We have like things like Preacher and Lucifer and Good Omens today, which is all about, it kind of flirts with the mundanity of like these giant biblical moments, and we kind of do it here with Dogma in a fun way. And again, I love that mundane, that real life, I love applying real life to the Bible, and just, it makes it accessible, I feel. And I feel it's kind of like Kevin Smith's strength was at here, kind of knowing this stuff. It's like, what, how can I recontextualize for an audience to really get into? And so he found a way. And, we have, I think, excellent performances from Linda Fiorentino, and especially Alan Rickman. Oh my God, Alan Rickman is so good in this movie.
Dragon, you're making good points, man. Maybe it's just the religious element for me that kind of puts me off because I don't know. Like, I know it's like an anti-religious movie. Dragon, it just kind of comes down to a taste issue, man.
Yeah,
I don't know
absolutely, I
what
get
to
it.
tell
The
you.
taste thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to for the Jay and Silent Bob thing. For me, this is the only thing that could possibly compete with Chasing Amy for me with the Jay and Bob usage, because I feel they were at their best here because they're really kind of cool and they just enter the movie. Again, they're kind of like these quote unquote props, but the point of this enter movie.
I do really like them. In this movie, I really like how they do just kind of like swoop in and, like, hey, all right, these guys are here, and they make sense in the context of the story.
Yeah, and like I love that when they enter the movie, it becomes a road movie, which is a lot of fun. Like they're going from point A to point B. They run into Chris Rock along the way, go to movies. It's just it's a lot of fun. Of course, the note like Silent Bob has some of his coolest moments. Think about it, Silent Bob has some of his coolest moments in this movie. Like he punches like no tickets. He's quoting some indie. It's nice. So I mean, last thing for me, I guess, is that with Dogma, I mean, this is a Kevin Smith movie to me with a cinematic weight and scale to it. Like we get to that, the third act's really cool. This movie has a really cool third act to me. The Alanis Morissette as God of it all, like that sort of stuff. I mean, like we have one of Affleck's best performances in his death scene in that movie. It's like I love the movie's corporate boardroom. I think there's a lot of good stuff. Again, a lot of that coming from Affleck and Damon, sure. But again, like, so honestly, I think it's kind of like it's the movies. It's not meandering time. It's not waiting around. It's like, okay, just point A, point B, and we got to make sure these guys don't go through the gate. Very simple. And again, as you mentioned, some fun satire. Buddy Christ. I mean, need I say more? Buddy Christ. So doing all this, Kevin Smith, he kind of gets a target on his back with like death threats and backlash. And again, the first of many audience and reception battles that Kevin Smith's going to have.
I will admit that the story, maybe this is one of the reasons why the movie itself doesn't resonate with me, is that I feel like the story surrounding this movie almost overshadow the movie itself for me.
Yeah? You mean the whole death threats thing?
No. I mean specifically the Dogma is dog shit story.
Oh, that what?
That is legendary, Dragon. That is one of my favorite Kevin Smith stories. All right.
Yeah. So again, I love the mileage he gets with the whole evenings with it, everything. Because again, like Mallrats, he gets Superman Lives, and of course that sends him on that path. And now we have the Dogma is dog, that with this. So it's pointing at this point, Kevin Smith, he's looking within for the movies at least twice in a row with Chasing Amy and Dogma. So that's kind of where we're at in the tracking of Kevin Smith. So now we get to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back from 2001. We're in the 2000s, baby.
All right, so believe it or not, Dragon, when I saw a poster for this movie at my movie theater, this was the first time I had ever seen Jay and Silent Bob.
Really?
And it perked my interest. I was like, who are Jay and Silent Bob, and why are they striking back? And I remember, like, this was one of those, like, R-rated movies where it's like, I don't even want to ask my parents to take me to this because God knows what sort of lewd shit is in this movie. But, of course, I ultimately did, circle around to it when I watched Clerks and then watched through the universe. And Dragon, this is definitely one of Kevin Smith's least substantial films in terms of like thematic things and things that he wants to say. However, I think it might be hands down his most entertaining and rewatchable movie.
It's fun when you look back on this movie. This, to me, if we're looking at the career, the filmography here, it feels like Kevin Smith at this point he's kind of basking in the success. Where at this point, Chasing Amy is like that's when he gets like praise from Quentin Tarantino. That's when he's the indie bigwig at that point. It's like Clerks was like it got his foot in the door, but Chasing Amy was like, oh man, he's doing stuff we never really talked about at that time. And then there's Dogma, which again, religious folks aren't too thrilled about. They don't like the Buddy Christ. Why don't they like the Buddy Christ? He's all happy. I mean, he's getting like, I really don't get like, how is that in song? Anyway, so the point being, Point being, he's really building up the claim again. Dogma is really, again, the thing that's annoys me about Dogma too is that you can't get on DVD easily because again, it's impossible because it's like a rights issue or something with they can't stream it anywhere. My point is, he's basking.
Not like I can't relate to that for another Kevin Smith movie.
That's what I'm saying. About. It's because I forget if it's because of certain events with certain guys who own companies or not. I forget if that's exactly the reason for that. But anyway. Point being, Kevin Smith, I think he's basking in the success here. He's at a high point, and this is kind of the reward. This is either the high point or the reward after the high point. It depends on how you look at Dogma. You could see this as, this is like Kevin Smith, like, I can do anything right. I'm just going to do a whole movie on Jay and Silent Bob, or I did something really good. I have the cachet to do this with Jay and Silent Bob,
Mm-hmm.
So that, because of that, it's just a fun romp within the cinematic universe he builds with the Askew-universe, like we're having crossover appeal. Like, hey, there's the guy from Chasing because he's met Jay and Silent Bob, and there's Brody. It's just a lot of fun intersect, as well as we're having fun within the industries. It's Kevin Smith poking fun at Hollywood.
I feel like this movie has just like memorable set piece after memorable set piece. It's like we've got like the Mystery Machine, we've got Carrie Fisher, we've got obviously all the Blunt Man and Chronic stuff. Dragon chasing Amy is easily the most poignant Silent Bob scene, but the funniest Silent Bob scene is the sign on the back of the car said "Critters of Hollywood."
I mean, let's be honest.
Fuck!
If you can pick just one moment of Silent Bob speaking, if you can only pick one,
it's got to be that. It's got to be that. I mean, I'm sorry, Chasing Amy's speech. You're wonderful, but
I mean, I like No Ticket, that I can't be. The sign's hysterical. The sign's funny. Also, to be fair though, Silent Bob usually gets like 2 opportunities to speak in the movie. He has the sign, and the other one's pretty good too. The whole copyright, the whole copyright law thing's great too.
Right. And of course, I feel like this movie does a really good job of kind of weaving all the disparate parts of the Askew-universe together, like movies and the comic book store and Blunt Man and Chronic and the Quick Stop. It really does do a great job of kind of dragging. This is like the stoner fucking comedy version of the Adventures, and I think it's awesome.
It is, and that's a very excellent point you're making. I hope you're going the same place I'm going to go with that later. But yes, this is this is kind of a self-aware. It's very much Tim taking a self-aware poke at his own IP and Hollywood's kind of direction that they're kind of at now. Like, this is like the beginning of the comic book movie, where it's like, hey, Affleck's going to play Daredevil. Of course, look where we are now. We reboot it then, and we reboot even better. That's what I'm saying. Like, before we get to all the reboot culture, and in many respects, the Avengers thing is very on point. But the other thing, like the way Kevin Smith kind of describes the movie, it's kind of his version of the Muppet movie in terms of yet another road movie
totally.
with Jay and Silent Bob. It's kind of like the Fozzie and Kermit, but just like the Fozzie and Kermit, you don't want to let your kids watch quite yet. It's I love. I mean, for me, Jay and Silent Bob. Here's the thing. Act 2 is a little is to me. It's not that it's bad; it's just the weakest link. Act 2 is to me is the weakest link. But Act 3, I love Act 3. That's when they get to the backlot. That's where the movie is. I could watch Act 3 and just be happy.
Oh yeah.
Nothing against anything else. I mean, Act 1's good setup, and again, 2's fine. You have the Scooby-Doo and they have stuff and Justice. That's fine. It's just it's like Act 3's fantastic. You have Mark Hamill. Like, hey kids, it's Mark Hamill. I love that part. The backlash shenanigans. It's honestly the thing to note here is this is like a tribute to the friendship of Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes.
Sure, absolutely.
Like, years later, you get into like the whole Jay and Silent Bob get old podcasting of it all, where it kind of all of that starts here. This is where, of course, we learn Jason. This is where we kind of predominantly learn Jason Mewes has a problem that we need to address. Because after this movie, Jason Mewes is a drug problem. Which, thankfully, folks, he's over now. He's been sober for many years. He has a daughter. The man's cleaned up. He's directed a movie. It's a fun movie too. He directed Madness in the Myth. The man's done tremendously well for himself. Anyway, point being, after Jay and Silent Bob weren't supposed to come back because things were that bad. Because we couldn't see Jay again. This was supposed to be the capper of it all there. And I love that we get to revisit that later on. And also fun thing to note that's going to be important later through a couple of these films. Kevin Smith's view on critics is at the start of this movie with the whole the moviepoopshoot.com of it all.
Oh God!
Again, kind of Kevin Smith's views on critics then versus now. He's a lot more kind of laid back about it. But
sure.
It's quite funny to see like Kevin Smith a little bit more teeth back in the day. It's kind of like The Evening with Kevin Smith. That sort of. All
right. Next up, Jersey Girl.
Yes. So we go from
Okay.
like Jay and Silent Bob.
Hot take.
Go on. Yeah. What do you got?
This is one of my favorites.
You know what's funny? I am a defender of Jersey Girl as well.
I will defend Jersey Girl to my dying day.
Me too.
This is such a fucking misunderstood movie.
It is.
Jennifer casts such a fucking unnecessary shadow over it. I think this movie is absolutely lovely. I really do. This movie is it's so heartwarming. It's a great portrait of a father and a daughter. And of course, just autobiographically with Smith himself, his feelings towards being a father are very, very present in the writing in this movie. It's a fucking crying shame that this movie is basically goes down to like, oh yeah, that's a Bennifer movie.
Yeah, I mean, again, you live and die by the sword that is Ben Affleck sometimes. But again, this is a good movie, and unfortunately,
I think it's more than a good movie. I think it's a great movie.
Honestly, I think it's a great movie. Just one scene I'm not crazy about, but it's not a big deal. And here's the thing: the only reason that scene doesn't work is because there's like two versions of the movie. And I still think after all these years they never released the director's cut. But it's the. See, the only issue I have with the movie is there's one scene, because everyone says the movie's too schmaltzy. I disagree with that, but there's one scene that is schmaltzy, and it's because of the edit. It's the town hall scene, where what they do is they don't show him giving the speech that wins everyone over. We just play music over, like, hey, he's winning the crowd.
Yeah, right.
Because Gertie told them to. It's like, what? That's why. I feel bad because that's why the critics are zeroing in on that scene, saying, oh, the movie's schmaltzy. Yes, because that one scene is schmaltzy. Why?
And you know what? You know what? The movie is literally a love letter from a father written to his daughter. It's allowed to be schmaltzy, dude.
And also, again, the other thing is, again, it is a movie about fatherhood in two respects. One, father and daughter, which, of course, Kevin Smith becomes a father. But also, I want to say, I don't know if intended from the get-go, but, his father passed away during the making of this movie. And
sure. Oh, yeah.
Tiki is going to sound, again, this itself might sound schmaltzy, but I got to tell you, when I think of Jersey Girl, the first thing I think of, because it really touched me so much, after you watch a movie. When I watched Jersey Girl for the first time, you get to the end of it, and it goes, I think the ending is fantastic, by the way, because you have that they're dancing, and they have like these Ollie Trinkies going through this whole journey, and of course George Carlin. By the way, I love that Kevin Smith in life got to work with not only his idol in Stanley, but his Q&A idol, as it were, his comedy idol in George Carlin. He put him in a couple movies, of course, Dogma being a really great role, but I think this is the best he ever got out of George Carlin, Jersey Girl.
Absolutely.
He does in Jersey as Pop in Jersey Girl, and getting him in on the whole Sweeney Todd role. Oh my God, it's heart-meltingly beautiful. And anyway, the point being, like, all of that, when I think of Jersey Girl, I think of like the ending of Donald Smith in the pool and like the whole like For You Pop, like like the tribute to his father. That really gets me in my heart of hearts. It's like, oh my God, it's so beautiful, because you're watching that movie. It's like, this has been such a great movie about a father's relationship, about fatherhood, and then you get to like, oh my God, his father passed away, and again his father encouraged him to get in the movies by taking him to movies in the first place. That's so beautiful. This, as Tiki said, unfairly maligned film. For sure, all that stupid Bennifer hate. The girls really good. Gertie, Raquel Castro, she's great in the movie as well. Excellent performances already. We have Stephen Root and Mike Starr in this movie. They're excellent cast. I mean, not so many good things. Again, it's Kevin Smith's taking a risk with this movie. I want to hit this: is that he doesn't have the safety cushion of the Askew-verse anymore, because he literally tries to close the book on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, like they hit like pop culture saturation. Like, Jay and Silent Bob for that Afro Man video. You've seen him in Scream 3. You've seen him everywhere. Like, we can't top him more. We literally can't bring Jay back. So we're taking a risk here. And he yet again looks within. He puts his heart on the screen. Unfortunately, the critics kind of tear him to pieces on it, which is sad.
I feel like it's getting more of a following now, though. I feel like it's not as maligned as it used to be.
It fills me with hope that you hear so many people during these Q&As and everything. At least at a certain point in time, you watch the old Q&As, I guess. But the fact is, because now it's, again, people have bolted over. So at that time, it's like, hey, I just want you to know I like Jersey Girl. I wrote a fan letter, Kevin, so I have no idea if he ever got it. And I'll say, hey, I like Jersey Girl as well. Like, that whole thing. That's what I'm saying, It's... Yeah, it's this film that's hopefully, at the very least, now the cop-outs around, I think this film's going to get a lot more, has gotten a lot more since then, We're going to get there.
All right. Okay, next up.
Yes.
Clerks 2. GOAT.
Yes, that's. I mean, for me, I think the best Kevin Smith's ever done, in my opinion, it's between Clerks 2 and Dogma. Being Clerks 2 is fantastic. It's really
Clerks 2 is it's the pinnacle of Kevin Smith. It really is. It doesn't get any better than this.
I mean, I nothing against the original Clerks. Original Clerks is fantastic, but
I think
Clerks
the original
2,
Clerks has a little bit more poignancy to it, to tell you the truth. I still like the hard edges of it. That being said, this is like a perfect marriage of like the observant Kevin Smith. Of course, I love the whole idea of being in, obviously, Dragon. I relate to this movie way more now than when I first saw it. With the idea of being in your 30s and everything. And then also it's got great Kevin Smith humor, both in kind of like the broad and the more kind of like pop culture sense. I really think that the Elias and Randall stuff in this movie is the best pop culture toe-to-toe arguments that Kevin Smith has ever written for a movie. I think Becky is maybe one of the best love interests that Kevin Smith has ever written.
Oh yeah.
Gotta love Rosario Dawson. That's really where I fell in love with Rosario Dawson, was this movie. I mean, it's got everything, man. This movie is, I don't think it's perfect. Like, I really could do without the donkey scene at the end. And
I know, but here's what I like though. Here's what they did. What they did is they built up like one really big, one big ridiculous kind of, basically one broad joke with the donkey show.
Sure.
And they built it up. That's the thing. I like that it's kind of a compromise with broad comedy almost, where again, we're going to keep things pretty grounded here. We're going to be reflective. There's going to be comedy, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be pretty straightforward until we need to get our guys, we got to get our guys arrested so they can have like the probably the best scene in the movie. They get that. We got to put them in there in the first place. How are we going to do that? Well, they work in movies. I don't think movies would reflect kindly on donkey shows.
That, and I kind of vary on my opinions on the big musical number depending on the day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it all. Basically, here, because it has that scene with Rosario Dawson at the end, they're like, Dante, I'm praying. Because it has that, I can give it a break, and that's fine. It's like, again, because we built up. What I'm hinting at with a lot of this is my favorite part. The reason Clerks 2 has it over the original Clerks for me is that I love the heart that we have within the movie. Has such a great heart to it,
Sure.
That's the thing. I love that we speak to the friendship between Dante and Randall, and we see like the love in Dante's eyes for Becky, and again that comes through. We have like a broad dance sequence, but again it leads to like the beautiful. We've seen they had a great back and forth, but also like, hey, there's consequence to this love, and we should talk about it. And like all of that's working. You gotta remember, think about how big a risk this thing was. Tiki. It's like Kevin Smith for years, like, oh yeah, Jay and Silent Bob, you'll never see him again. We're done. And of course like. Very much saying, well, you're never going to see a Clerks. There's going to be a Clerks cartoon, but never a Clerks 2. Like, like that.
The Clerks cartoon, by the way, we could do a whole podcast.
We could.
That's one of the best animated series ever made, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's good. I don't want to. I mean, but yeah, it's good.
Dragon Episode 2 was a clip show. It's
brilliant. Okay,
that puts it among the greats for me. All right.
All right,
that puts it among the greats. That alone.
Okay, so my point is like he takes a risk by returning to the well, but he had something to say with it, and of course, also positive note. Again, Jay, he at this point in time, again, I know it was kind of yo-yoed for a while. Now it's all great, but I'm saying at the time, Jay was on the recovery wagon, and he was like, hey. I'm going to reward you we're going to do Clerks 2. You're good enough to come back. We can actually bring it back, which kind of was the impetus. And so, this sequel, this is Kevin Smith with the wisdom and heart, using wisdom and heart to his advantage within the same sandbox. And he's digging deeper into Dante and Randall, which brings about that jail scene, which is like, that's the cornerstone of the movie for me. Not only just for those two guys speaking to their friendship and speaking to, I don't want you to go without me, is Jay and Silent Bob having this beautiful, for me, I think the best Jay and Silent Bob moment in the whole Skewniverse possibly is them saving the day by offering to get loan of money to buy the Quick Stop and RSTV. The way they save the day, like say they just want a place to stand in front. That's all they want. It's just that's beautiful. That's just beautiful. Like that's why Clerks 2 was always gonna be one of like Kevin Smith's finds, because he had the perfect blend of everything. He didn't compromise what he's done so well, what he kind of like patented with Clerks. But also he built upon it. Again, it's in color, which violates what kind of Clerks was. But again, like it did, and of course we have the fire being the colorful element.
Yeah, I do love how we get to color.
That's really clever.
And then, of course, one of the most perfect moments in a Kevin Smith film ever is when we go back to the black and white at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. And basically, to me, the whole film, the whole film is about self-evaluation after a setback. That's what the whole film is. And if you look at Kevin Smith, again, he has a setback with Jersey Girl. He put his heart and soul into a film. Critics didn't like it. And Bennifer things screwed around with that. He then goes back to Clerks. And again, Clerks is the self-evaluation film. Again, paralleling life yet again. And basically, he's the Jersey boy. He's Dante growing up into the L.A. man or the Mangelo, depending on how you like to phrase that. Kind of the Angelophile, like the Mangelophile. I don't know. The point being, he's becoming going from a Jersey boy to an L.A. man. We're going to see how that treats him.
All right.
So it's a solid close to the Askew universe, at least for a couple of years.
Okay, so next up, Zach and Miri make a porno.
Yes.
Dragon, this is probably the most middle of the road of all the Kevin Smith movies. I don't dislike it. There's some funny bits in it. There's definitely some heartfelt moments in it, for sure. It's very middle of the road. I struggle to form a solid opinion on this one way or another.
It's an interesting one, to say the least. It has interesting points to it. And again, looking back on it, I think there's some fun stuff to mine from it. Again, is it one you go back to as often as, say, a Clerks 2? Heck no. So here's the thing. So Kevin Smith, he's trying to revisit the Jersey Girl well here, but also trying to parallel his career, kind of like he was doing with kind of the Askewverse stuff. He's basically this, believe it or not, this is kind of the model for where he's going with Clerks 3 to an extent, like the self-aware making a movie within a location, which is basically how he made the original Clerks. So Kevin Smith, he's basically, the way he's always framed the movies, that he's basically, this whole movie is about making Clerks as a porno, and he had sex with Scott Mosier at the end. That's kind of what this movie is. That's the way he
almost
phrases
sounds
it.
more of like a dare of a movie project than anything
I know,
else.
that's the thing, though. But again, you look at this movie, that is exactly, well, yeah, it's pretty much it. It's like, what if you just made Clerks as a clerk in a coffee place? That's pretty much it. Here's what I come back when I rewatched the movie, getting ready for this, Tiki, because I hadn't seen this one in ages. Because it's not one I go back to, as you can probably imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But I respect how authentic Seth Rogen feels as the Kevin Smith kind of archetype, because he feels so much. He's perfect casting for the Kevin Smith then. In how he interprets Kevin Smith's voice flawlessly. You see Seth Rogen, you're hearing and seeing Kevin Smith. I think that's fantastic.
I hear you.
That's what's great about the movie. And basically the movie is, yet again, it's kind of a Kevin Smith, in the vein of like a Chasing Amy, it's kind of Kevin Smith's take on relationships. And what Kevin Smith, the big takeaway for me with the movie is that Kevin Smith's taking the judgment out of life and filmmaking. Where in real life, and we're kind of now people are open-minded a little bit more now, but this, it's not going back that far back, but still roughly over 10 years. These characters, life is hard. You roll around the dirt. To use a Better Call Saul reference, real life, sometimes you roll around the dirt and kind of roll around in filth, as it were, and that kind of leads to the adult film industry. And basically what he's showing here, because, he did a podcast with Katie Morgan in this movie, he's showing that there's no shame in a tested industry that works. Again, is it a glowing industry? Kevin Smith, he's kind of built a whole empire on profanity and vulgarity with the humor in his movies. And he's kind of like looking at that, like, guys, like, don't be ashamed of this. This is how they're making money. And, that there's something kind of remarkable, there's something kind of endearing about that,
Sure.
I don't know if it saves it. And again, the marketing was terrible in this movie. So this movie, I feel so bad for him because the movie, it made money, but like just enough money. And half the reason for that is because it feels like if you were a Kevin Smith fan, you would go to this movie, but you didn't know what this movie was. It's like Zach and Miri, because you can't say porno until 9 o'clock.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Like the poster's just stick figures, and it's that's the thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, what a hot mess.
And like now, if like this thing were streaming, people would watch it like crazy because they're watching like that sex education show on Netflix and everything. People are they're going crazy for that sort of stuff. Like they would eat this movie up today. But again, it's it's crazy. And of course, the big takeaway we got to. I'm sure you're eager to talk about this. So of course, the result of this film, and we're of course meeting Seth Rogen. Kevin Smith kind of becomes Silent Bob to an extent. He in licking his wounds, he turns to marijuana. He actually becomes a stoner. He becomes a Wakenbaker.
Dragon, it's honestly kind of insane to me that Kevin Smith wasn't a stoner before this.
I think he may have touched it once or twice, but never became a stoner.
Fucking crazy. That's fucking crazy to me.
But yeah, he was basically licking his wounds after this movie just didn't go well, and basically he was just in fielding the critics and everything. He ended up just waking and baking every morning while I was looking for the inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Because he put himself out there. He was in the big leagues. Basically, as he kind of phrased it, he tried to do a Judd Apatow movie too much, and that was his thing. He tried to be commercially successful.
That's a big problem with Zack and Miri, I think. Mm-hmm. And I, frankly, as you know, with my thoughts on the King of Staten Island, I just think that Judd Apatow in general, I mean, sure, his name was bigger back then, but I think the guy's honestly kind of a little bit of a hack. I really do.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, one other thing to note with the whole like stoner Kevin Smith era, because it's a pretty big shift in the man in the movies.
No, you're right. You're right.
So Kevin Smith, I've always seen Kevin Smith. Now it's like a third era of Kevin Smith with him post heart attack. But again, you have like pre stoner Kevin Smith, which is very much the evening with Kevin Smith. Very much kind of like he's kind of a tight guy in the interview, but he's has a rapacious wit. He's a smart guy. He can Q&A the whole bunch, but a little bit more of a cynical edge. Post stoner. He's very happy on the surface. He's very happy.
Right.
The point being, it's like every thought that I love how Kevin Smith, he's given thoughts on watching the old evenings with. He can barely watch because like, you made Clerks smile, darn it, smile. You made and that's the thing. He's very self-deprecating and like who he used to be. Because again, the stoner Kevin Smith, he's very much he's a happy-go-lucky guy. Basically, all the thoughts in his head they kind of has within those movies, all like the comedy of like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. It's like. It's there, but now he's brought it out to the surface. He doesn't have as much of a filter anymore, despite the fact he's using a filter now. Sorry, dumb joke. Anyway, point being, I've always had the lingering question: did he lose a step to compensate? In a sense, like did he lose a step in becoming a stoner that he might have had pre-stoner? And again, it's kind of hard to tell, especially where he's at now, because again, he has. In some aspects, his memory is great. In some aspects, he's kind of forgetting things that he said years ago. By the same token, I don't know. It's like it compensates out in an interesting way. Anyway.
Okay, well, that leads into Cop Out, and oh boy, Drake, I don't have the heart to watch this movie. I really don't. I think it led to like some of the funniest stories that Kevin Smith has ever told.
Oh yeah,
but that's like really about all the value and time that I will give this thing.
So Cop Out, we're in 2010. Kevin Smith, he's playing the studio game again. Unfortunately, he's kind of repeating somewhat of a mistake he did with Zack and Miri. This is
like a way, way worse version, because at least with Zack and Miri, it was kind of his vision.
Yeah, that's the thing. So Zack and Miri is absolutely, again, I respect where he was going with. His heart was in the right place with Zack and Miri, just again, kind of the wrong distribution. This is before, around 2008 and especially around 2010. Believe it or not, the indie film industry is not doing well. Indie kind of goes away for a while. This late 2000s period, and then it kind of comes back a few years later. And basically, Kevin Smith.
You're right. You know why is because I feel like indie kind of exploded onto the scene in the in the early 2000s, and the 90s, sure, and the early 2000s.
Yeah,
and I think Little Miss Sunshine was probably like the last gasp of like great indie filmmaking.
That sounds about right. Yeah,
and then after Little Miss Sunshine, I feel like every fucking indie movie tried to be Little Miss Sunshine.
It kind of burned itself out.
Yeah.
Now, I can't say it's
like, hey, look at all these quirky characters, and like, I don't know.
Now, I can't say this authoritatively, but in my heart of hearts, I like to think that Kevin Smith kind of brought back indie with his self-distribution methodology, the ways he's kind of been distributing by himself when he made his movies. Once we get to a little later in the catalog here,
Sure.
In a sense, I like to think he kind of brought it back, but again, we'll see how that. Well, next one, I guess we'll kind of weigh that anyway. So, point being, Cop Out. So Cop Out, again, boys, he's doubling down the studio game because, again, the indie industry isn't really there at the moment, so he doesn't really have much of an option. And, like, they're liking his work. It's like, hey, I liked what you did there. Why don't you want to do a movie? He's like, yeah, like, you want to do, like, an action movie? He says, well, my father took me to action movies, like the diehards of the day. Of course I'd like to.
Right.
So, again, the heart's in the right place at the start of it, but, again, big difference. I think this really says a lot. Kevin Smith didn't write this movie. He's the only movie Kevin Smith hasn't written. So he's literally just coming on as director. And this ain't like a Supergirl or like a Flash, because that's like a well-oiled machine, or basically that's TV. It's very different than the film game. So Unfortunately, Cop Out. Long and short of it is, believe me, I rewatched the clips for this because I've seen it once and I did not go back to it for a reason. It's Cop Out. It lives up to the namesake. It's not necessarily bad, but Tiki, you would never like this movie because this is absolutely, and this is me saying this. This is as mediocre as it gets. I'm not saying that, you know. It's truly mediocre. So that's the thing, because again, it's generic in a lot of places. Maybe a few spouts of like Kevin Smith rewrites here and there, but again, basically Tracy Morgan is fun. If you're a big Tracy Morgan fan, I would recommend it.
Ooh, I have major problems with Tracy Morgan, like major ethical problems with Tracy Morgan. So
that's what I'm saying. So the point being, sounding less of a son. Again, I sound like a defective actor.
Like honestly, fuck Tracy Morgan.
The point, sure. That's what I'm saying. The point being, if there was a time, again at this time, I believe more of that less known in the world. But so, the point being, it's in theory, again, a great idea. Hey, Kevin Smith making a movie like the movies he saw with his father, which again, like a guy who knows actually, the guy who was in a Die Hard movie with Bruce Willis, of course, is where we get the famed Bruce Willis of it all, which is so sad given they had such a great time and Live Free or Die Hard with each other. It was such like a hero worship moment. Like the whole
right, yeah.
They had such a great time. He's practically a sidekick in that movie. It was adorable. And then just learning that Kevin Smith again, once he was in the chair, and of course hearing from the director, oh god, every director's worst nightmare is Bruce Willis. At least almost every, like 75% of the director's worst nightmare is Bruce Willis, and learning it firsthand. If Bruce Willis doesn't like you, if he doesn't take you, it's like a horse that doesn't like you, he's going to buck you every chance he gets. It's like, oh god, it's so sad to hear the celebrity nightmare he had. Poor Kevin Smith with Bruce Willis, and such a crust. And basically, this is the Kevin Smith getting a taste of reality from Hollywood. He's kind of tasted his first flops with. This is the first major flop he had with Cop Out, I guess, because this was like critically they hated it. Zack and Miri at least was like kind of broke even terms, like 60, like a 65%, so to speak. So the point being, Cop is not really a lot to say. It's just this is the anti-other guys. You know how much I love the other guys. This is the anti-version of that. And the reason for that is because they were competing with each other. Because Cop Out was supposed to be the other guys, but then they jumped ship to do the other guys. That's what happened. So of course, how's it get any worse for our poor hero Kevin Smith? Tries to go on a plane one day. Southwest incident. Oh god, he's too fat to fly at that time. He's not too fat to fly, but the South Airline thinks he's too fat to fly.
Oh god.
So the point being, it's not coming up Millhouse for Kevin Smith at this time. He was on such a good roll for a while, but again with Indy kind of disappearing, I mean, did not serve him well. Yeah.
Okay, so Dragon, I am so fucking frustrated at the digital distribution for Red State.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say. I absolutely would have watched this movie if I actually had the fucking means to watch it, but I don't. I'm fascinated by it. I would love to watch it. Of course, Michael Parks, is kind of like Michael Parks kind of vaguely gave Kevin Smith a new renaissance with his two performances. And I've heard nothing but good things about Michael Parks in this movie, so I have no doubt that he's great. Dragon, I am so fascinated by this movie. I want to see it so badly.
Absolutely, certainly. I mean, so Red State, we enter a phrase. So, despite all the bad stuff that happened to Kevin Smith with Cop Out on every front, unfortunately, big thing is that we kind of have the birth of Kevin Smith, the icon, versus Silent Bob. He's no longer seen Silent Bob. This is where we get Kevin, the guy in the jersey. We know him as the guy in the jersey now, the Jersey boy in the jersey. How quaint. Anyway. The point being, like, Kevin Smith yet again is the beacon of truth because he'll tell you everything. Like, he'll tell you about the whole thing with Southwest. He'll tell you about the whole thing with Bruce Willis. He's a beacon of truth. And, of course, with the beacon of truth comes Red State, where this is like the slow resurgence of indie film with Red State. It's kind of the slow resurgence. They're building the campaign. I forget if this was technically – because here's the thing, of course, the reason you're having trouble finding it. I want to say this is done through Lionsgate or something, I think. The point being, I think this technically had like a studio. It's like half indie, half studio, I think. But this is really this is like his return to like doing an indie film where again it doesn't have a huge budget. It only has like a budget of $4 million or $5 million. Mm-hmm. And this was inspired by his gay friend, kind of one of his many friends, Malcolm Ingram, kind of his guy, the party bus guy, if you remember that from that story. Malcolm, he did documentaries. He's made a couple documentaries. He talked to the guys from the Westboro Baptist Church, the very anti-gay group,
Mhm.
and the Phelps family, who basically inspire a film about. Basically gives them an idea. Let's do an indie horror film about these very anti-gay, these guys protesting funerals and everything. What if we did like a film about that? Basically, this is Kevin Smith's version of Get Out, Tiki. That's the best way I could accommodate. It's pretty much like what's the worst case if you ended up kind of running across these guys and you were trapped in at their mercy. That's pretty much what this film is.
Mhm.
Now, bear in mind, I can't speak authoritatively about this either, but I've heard a lot of things about it. I've watched clips. I've gotten the clip notes of it.
Mhm.
I'm impressed. I too would like to see this movie because I hear it's like one of Kevin Smith's best works. So again, even he deems like he making like a true blue movie, as he would phrase it. Which again, I think he's made some other really great true blue movies, but that's it's self-deprecation.
I truly think this would be one of my favorites in his filmography if I had a chance to watch it. I really do. I feel like it's right up my alley.
Because you remember, this is the first time he's doing horror, and I think you would have, because of that, you being the big horror buff that you are, or at least the big kind of like, what would you call it? Would you call it thriller buff or horror buff?
No, I call myself a horror buff. Thriller is like a subgenre of horror.
There you go. Yeah, they got a lot of great acting. He's working with Kevin Pollak, who we worked with the Cop Out. So he basically gets some really good stuff out of like some of the people he's come across the way. It's always like building like the Muppet Brigade, if you will. It's like he's got Kevin Pollak as Gonzo, if you will. I don't know. So anyway, we have Stephen Root's in this. He plays the sheriff. There's like a whole thing with the sheriff too, which is really interesting. I won't spoil it for you. The point is, Michael Parks, you have John Goodman, and even Matt L. Jones. Badger, man, freaking Badger's in this movie.
I need to see it.
Unfortunately, we can't speak too much about it. All I can say is that, again, this built him a lot of acclaim, and this, you're right, Dave, this enters like the third renaissance of Kevin Smith, is where we enter like the third stage of Kevin Smith.
Sure.
Okay.
Right. That transitions into Tusk. Dragon, This is a very love it or hate it movie, and I love it. I unabashedly love it. This to me is like up there with Jersey Girl and Clerks 2 as far as my personal favorites in his filmography.
Really? You got a lot of love for Tusk.
A lot of love for Tusk. I think that Tusk is an almost perfect blend of comedy and body horror. And what I mean by that is that you will be laughing at the absurdity of the situation and still horrified by it. And it's almost like the laughing is kind of like a coping mechanism almost. And of course, we can't talk about Tusk without talking about the genesis of Tusk, which is easily one of my favorite Kevin Smith podcast moments of all time.
Well, tell him about it.
I feel like you could tell the story better.
Okay, so essentially, in this new kind of renaissance of Kevin Smith, in the third stage of it, Kevin Smith, of course, at this point in time, he's podcaster extraordinaire. This is where Kevin Smith really kind of becomes the podcaster. I mean, I know it's kind of like during the Southwest, but just go with me on this. The point being, podcasting has become so all-consuming, it's starting to define his work going forward. Which, again, kind of through Malcolm led to Red State, and again, in a big way here leads to doing Smodcast with Scott Mosier. And of course, during Smodcast, they're looking through like random news items, kind of giving their thoughts on things, and they learn about this like, I don't know if it's like a Craigslist ad or something. I heard about like an ad someone put out about a guy basically looking for roommate. I'll pay all the utilities and everything, but there are conditions. Those conditions were they're laughing their heads off. You gotta dress in a walrus costume and do walrus things. And this led to basically the two of them having such a good time within laughing about it that basically they're kind of pitching a movie in the midst of this, and that kind of leads to them posing to the audience, like doing this little mini campaign, I guess maybe on Twitter and everything as well, like hashtag walrus yes or walrus no, should we do a movie on this? And resounding walrus yes.
Oh my God, Dragon, I remember listening to this podcast and just being like, this has to exist. This is too good of an idea to not pass up. I need to see what becomes of this. And honestly, what became of it is not as intense as I was kind of hoping for, but it's very much in that brand of just kind of the Kevin Smith sort of like, I don't know. It's a very fascinating movie where, first of all, I think that Justin Long's character
is just a wonderful character to just have a comeuppance for, you know, and I feel like it's a great comeuppance movie, if that makes sense.
And yet again, Kevin Smith may be a little bit of an autobiographical thing there too. Like, you know, he's the hotshot podcaster. It's like, yeah, I'm having so much time talking about things, and like, what if there was a guy who didn't like what you, either a guy who didn't like what you said, or a guy who basically you cosmically got a comeuppance for something you said on a podcast.
So, and of course, Michael Parks is just out of this world.
This is his finest performance out of. I mean, look again. Obviously, we haven't seen. I've watched a bunch of clips of Michael Parks acting in Red State. I'm blown away by that. But still, even seeing that, his performance in this is astonishing. Again, the trailer moment. There's a trailer moment. I think is what you were kind of alluding to earlier with the humor thing. Mm-hmm. When Justin Long loses a leg, or does he lose a leg? Just his reaction with, again, the comedy within the horror, and then like these random terrifying choices that Michael Parks making with the whole like he's like yelling at him, like that moment from the trailers. What really intrigued me about Tusk, oh my god, just like screaming in the camera. What is it? Kind of like a laugh, but also just kind of a shout. And of course, we'd be remiss without hyping up one of the coolest aspects of the movie. The suits, man. The suits. Bob Kurtzman, the guy who did, as Kevin Smith likes to point out, did Dirk Diggler's prosthetic in Boogie Nights. Bob Kurtzman made the walrus suits, and my God, they are. It's a beautiful horror, man. It's gorgeous what he did with the suits. It was terrifying yet artful thing you've seen.
I honestly think this is the darkest ending to any Kevin Smith movie.
It is. I know, and really, he applauded for that, though. It's like years before, he doesn't go dark with Clerks, which is a smart choice. But again, like years later, ends dark with it here. Like, oh my God, he gets revenge, man. But my God, is he just Justin Long's performance in that scene too is gobsmacking what he does in that scene. It's, a little silly if you have distance, but if you're invested, if you're in the movie up to that point, it's like, oh my God, look how it's terrifying. Again, Justin Long is just time tested and proven to be a great protagonist in this. He really is. He's such a good actor. Nice, good actor. It's such a simple yet insane, terrifying premise. So strange. It has to be seen to be believed. Because if you told me about this movie, even if you just told me how it got made, I wouldn't believe it. You have to see it. Like, so wait, what is he going to do? He's going to put him in a what? And he's going to do what? And there's going to be a room with a projector and like an what?
Yeah, but
crazy.
I mean, like I said, I really do think that this is it's a love it or hate it type of movie for sure. Yeah. And I understand that, and I totally get why people would hate it, but it's up my alley. That's all I can say. It's up my alley. It speaks my language as a film fan.
Yes, and it birthed a True North trilogy with a Canadian horror film series. Can you believe it?
Oh God. Okay, so speaking of,
you'll go.
All right, Dragon. I still have not had the stomach to watch this.
I think it's a nice movie. It really is. It's no Tusk. Okay, I'll tell you that it's no Tusk. But the point being, it's like Kevin Smith taking a left turn from Tusk. That's the idea. It's like he's not trying not to repeat himself. Basically, this is an installment within his True North trilogy. Like 2 out of 3 films. We haven't gotten the third one yet. This is the second one. So yet again, we continue the podcast theme, and it's kind of like the podcast theme as well as something we get to explore more with the next movie, Next Generation Clerks, as in like the next generation aspect of the View Askew-averse.
Sure.
So we have Harley Quinn, his daughter is actually getting to express her acting chops, as well as Johnny Depp's daughter, Lily Rose. So, they play these 2 girls named Colleen, and they were clerks. They were in Tusk. They were the Ed to Zed girls. They were like the clerks in that. Basically, this is the spinoff. They got their own kind of version of a Canadian.
I do think they had some of the biggest laughs in Tusk, if I'm being honest.
And I think if you like that, Tiki, you'd like. This is like again. It's kind of like imagine within Tusk, you had like a Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back ish. It's kind of clerk. I don't know if I'm describing it right. The point being, it's a Clerks spinoff within the Canadian Clerks,
sure,
but this is a movie with the demographic for a teen audience, but still it's like teen up. It's like it's not for little kids, but it's like something that it's something built in for a younger.
No, I get you. I know how he pitched it. I get you.
Yeah, so I mean, what I really like about this too is it's very Hollywood Babylon inspired. Basically, if Tusk is inspired by Smodcast, again, hence the hashtag Walrus, yes, this is absolutely Hollywood Babylon inspired because some of the running gags from Hollywood Babylon, especially into the third act, Ralph Garman, who is he becomes a regular player in the Kevin Smith films within the Renaissance, like Red Sea onward. He's in all the movies going forward. I love me Ralph Garman, the impressionist extraordinaire. He gets to do his Hollywood Babylon impressions in the third act as kind of the big brain behind all the villainy in the film. The guy who created the Bratzies, the little Nazi sausages that are portrayed by Kevin Smith doing his German voice from Hollywood Babylon. It's a lot of fun. It's like, it's absolutely a comedy. It's a comedy within, like, it's not like, it's more like Joe Dante horror before it's like,
Sure.
That's what it is. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a cute and harmless film. It's directed towards the teen audience. It's like nowhere near as. I think this thing got. I don't know why this thing got maligned because going into it who your demographic is. I don't know why people are expecting so much from it. Where they're saying like this is the lowest, this is the worst thing Kevin Smith ever. Anyway, have you not seen Cop Out? Apparently not, because
it's worse than Cop Out. I refuse to believe it's worse than Cop Out.
That's what I'm saying. Because the movie, it's. I mean, Justin Long has a really nice role. It's just really nice. He plays the yoga instructor that befriends the girls. And he's just so darn pleasant. It's like there's so much. There's a pleasant quality to it. There's a fun quality to it. It's a little crazy in places, but it's just this farcical, fun story about a Nazi going. Basically, the whole it builds around a Nazi going to war with critics, who was frozen Captain America style for 70 years. Who wakes up? The war is over, so he's going to go to war with critics again. Yet again, a Kevin Smith theme here. He's going to war with the critics. And it's oh god, it's just the movie. It's kind of asking for scrutiny. It's kind of asking for scrutiny with the hater culture. Like we look upon trolls and people like I hate things. I'm a negative. I review things all negatively, and that's the thing. So with that, in that respect, the movie, I think that's where we get all the hate from. It's like, how dare you poke fun at critics? It's like, I mean, come on, we're in the society today. Why they're kind of teeing up like the critics aren't going to like this movie, but that's unfair. The movie's it's a fun little cutesy movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Stanley has one of his has a nice cameo in it as well, and Kevin Conroy too. He's in that too.
Nice. Okay. Now Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, arguably the movie that literally kind of saved Kevin Smith's life.
Yes. Oh god! So this, the long and short of this one is Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. This is Kevin Smith's Avengers Endgame in many respects.
This is a very, very, very flawed movie, and I love it. You know what I mean? It's incredibly flawed in a lot of ways, but it's got so much heart and passion behind it, and so many in jokes and so many Easter eggs. I think you and I can both agree, like the second act stuff with the daughter is pretty, like, it's not that it's not meaningful. It's just, I feel like it kind of drifts from the focus of the film a little bit. But I mean, and I just frankly, this film is nowhere near as consistently funny as the first movie, frankly.
But here's the funny thing: in making the movie over again, same issues with Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. Act 2, again, not as good as the other two acts. Not bad, but the other two acts kind of exceeded.
Sure. right, exactly.
And again, for kind of the same reasons. Again, we have like the kind of the next generation kind of cat burglars thing going on.
I was dying in the courtroom scene.
You know what's weird? I don't. It's not that it's bad. I just don't care for the courtroom scene because it feels like that's the only time where it feels a little too farcical for me. You know, it's like it's okay.
Oh my god, I loved it. We'll have to agree to disagree on that.
I mean, yeah, sure, that's fair. I mean, I'm glad you liked that, by all means. I'm just saying, it's like it feels like a little like it feels like Kevin's definitely flying by the seat of his pants, like how the court process works and all those law orders he's watched. He just feels like I don't know. Anyway, go on, sorry, but yeah,
it's fine. Okay, let's see. So, I also one of the big takeaways for me in this movie is, my God, does Kevin Smith still have it when it comes to silent comedy?
He does.
He never lost a step.
It feels like he's gotten even better at it.
I know. It really does. I mean, there is just a lot. Honestly, I feel like some of the biggest laughs in the whole movie are just like Silent Bob reaction shots.
in so many ways, this movie is a literal revival. Not only in the man near death on the operating table, but getting to the operating table, but again, it's just he's revived not only just the energy of which he's performing Silent Bob, but in his career and his motivation, just going into this movie, like kind of bringing the early 2000s back in a big way. And I love like his old on the interview series always said like his realization was that had he passed, Yoga Hosers would have been the last film of his, and he was in the midst of doing Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. He wanted to see this film to its fruition. Again, you want to see Jay and Silent Bob return at least one more time, whether it be in a Clerks 3 or something else like this. And I got to tell you, I know that he's looking at the progression. Young Kevin Smith would not care about it because young Kevin Smith's like, I'm done with Jay and Silent Bob. I don't want to bring it yet.
Sure.
Like a bad penny, but a beloved bad penny. It's like they keep coming back. But this was just this has what I can't say this is as good as Clerks 2 because it's not. It isn't. But what I love about it is something that has in common with Clerks 2, where Clerks 2 has a heart to it, and this movie has tremendous heart to it in places. And again, I know the phrasing, heart, and all that sort of stuff, but go with me. It's the fact that I mean, my heart melts for Jay's arc in this movie of Jay becoming a father, and how, of course, that parallels Kevin Smith again, kind of growing up, having a grown child at this point, having his daughter, a Jersey girl, having grown up to, having grown to be kind of like the one giving him the business now, and kind of co-starring in him with things, and she's having a career of her own renaissance, that she's our own next generation of Smith, and kind of celebrating that. I mean, James Venable's score is fantastic, and just like the scene where Jay is told by Justice that he has a daughter, and there's this heartbreaking moment where she says, "You've always had, $1 million heart, nickel head, but you've always had Silent Bob. I didn't really think you were ready for a family." You have like this sad music coming into place. Oh man, I feel so bad for Jay.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff like that through the movie, as well as, of course, cameos galore, my friend. Endgame, like portal scenes galore in this movie. Yeah.
All right. And that's it. Now we just have to talk about the future.
Yes.
So, one of the things that you didn't mention, Dragon, that I want to kind of keep tabs on, Moose Jaws. What's up with Moose Jaws?
Well, here's the thing. Moose Jaws is always like the one he hyped up next, but then, of course, us being in lockdown.
I know. It always feels like it's the one he's going to get to next, and then he always gets sidetracked.
Now, to be fair, I really do feel, because if Moose Jaws is supposed to be the third, it feels like he's crafting the True North trilogy. He does Tusk, and then he says, I want to do more of this, and then he's going to do... Moose Jaws. Moose Jaws has probably been there from the inception, but then Yoga Hosers was kind of spun off in the midst of Tusk. So that one kind of fell into place then. So the point being, Moose Jaws is supposed to be after those two. But then, again, he's going to get sidetracked with not just the podcasting, but also, again, some of his... He's done some pilot work for television stuff, and Comic Book Man and stuff like that. The point being, the man gets a little sidetracked. So as he's in the throes of Moose Jaws as the next movie, the heart attack happens, the near death. And that kind of refocuses things. So it feels like Moose Jaws literally was the next one, but then the state of the world right now with the with the quarantine, he's now been reworking Twilight of the Mallrats because he was supposed to do a series on Mallrats in the interim as a TV show. But again, Universal was saying, "Oh no!" But everyone loves Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, saying, "Hey, let's do Mallrats." Or some, I forget how they're doing it, but the point being, Moose Jaws. I want to say he's been pushed back to I want to say it's like fourth in the rotation now. But then again, this Kilroy movie is coming out of the blue nowhere. There's a trailer for Kilroy. We had the virtual San Diego Comic-Con. So next year we're getting Kilroy Was Here, a new horror movie. Not a Canadian one, but a new one. It's basically I don't know are you aware of like what Kilroy Was Here is at all? It's like
no, not even remotely familiar with it.
Essentially, there's like a graffiti that's kind of gone around since World War II about this big nose like kind of cartoon character, and the idea is he's like just a big nose monster is going to be the horror icon of this movie. Just some big nosed horror things like going around killing people. We haven't seen it in the trailer. I have no idea what it looks like. They're saying it looks like the graffiti, which is like it's a big nose guy looking over a wall. As the guy that has like a Squidward nose, but even bigger. So that's what's coming next, followed by Twilight of the Mallrats, which he's writing now. Which I don't know if it's going to be a show or a movie. It's supposed to be a show. Now it might be looking at a movie because of how well Jay and Silent Bob Reboot did. Which, by the way, Reboot for me, I find it really rewatchable. I have a good time rewatching that movie. Man,
nice.
Let's see. Anyways, of course, the big one, the ones he's definitely confirmed, again, with the whole success and resurgence, creativity flowing through him with Reboot, showing you how far he's come along. He's no longer the man afraid of dipping back in the same well. He's doing Twilight of the Mallrats, which is next generation Mallrats and the kids and everything, doing Clerks 3, finally. And we have a premise.
Do we?
Now, this could change, but the last they've said, big thing, the reason Clerks 3 was delayed for so long, by the way, Jeff Anderson, Randall, did not want to do with Clerks 3. He was very against it. Here's the thing that baffles me. How is Jeff Anderson not in Jay and Silent Bob Reboot if he doesn't want, he's not doing Clerks 3? The only one who didn't show up out of everyone, Jeff Anderson. Point being, he's finally back on board, so they're doing Clerks 3. And the story is, I don't know if it's vindictive or not, but again, paralleling real life, Randall has a near-fatal heart attack.
Oh, God.
And Dante, and again, Kevin Smith's been touting off, there's going to be a full circle element, because he did a script for Clerks that they read, and the original script that they're not using is, had him probably had him die at the end. The point being, it was going to be a darker ending, which they're not doing. They're not doing the dark ending. Like Clerks, they were going to do a dark ending, and they changed it around. Dante is making a movie at the Quick Stop.
Mm-hmm.
So he's making Clerks within Clerks. That seems.
Oh, nice.
Basically, we're going to be. I assume that's going to be the main thing of the movie. And Randall's again going to bring kind of the emotional heft within the thing about kind of like again now kind of towards midlife they're going to be reevaluating things.
Mm-hmm.
And moose jaws.
Yeah. All right.
It's basically Jaws with a moose.
Yeah. Okay, Dragon, I think we should probably wrap up because
Yes.
we're kind of going a little long on this. Final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts. What do you got?
Well, I mean, like we said earlier, I kind of talking through these movies, I feel like my top 3 is like an incredibly eclectic top 3, fucking Jersey Girl, Clerks 2, and Tusk of all things. So, I mean, that just goes to show you how eclectic this guy's filmography is, man. It really is. And I feel like I respect that about the guy. Sure, there's more movies in his filmography that don't really gel with me than movies that do gel with me. But the ones that do really gel with me and really resonate with me and really have an impact. And overall, like I said, I mean, we could make a whole other retrospective on just the work he's done in podcasting. Maybe we'll do that for, I don't know, his 55th birthday or something like that. Who knows, but, I really think that it's a very interesting journey through his filmography, like kind of mirroring himself as a man and as a father and as a husband and, as just kind of like someone who's maturing into his, into his middle age. I really think that it's been just kind of an interesting story seeing it develop kind of behind the scenes. So, and of course the fact that the podcasts are intrinsically linked with the movies themselves, that just kind of makes it all the better. So yeah.
All right, final thoughts from me and we can ditch the future. I know we're in the future, but we don't need the reminder. We're good. Okay. Final thoughts from me. Again, Kevin Smith, he's just one of my favorite people, and he really is. He's the ultimate storyteller. I'm so glad he made it to 50. I was really scared when I heard that news a couple of years back. I was terrified, man. I was like, oh no, anyone, please, not him. I'm so glad he made it to 50. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy that he's going to be able to kind of see things flourish, make it to the 50, of course, continue to be with his family and all that sort of stuff. And just, I'm glad for that. The fact that we just get to hear him again on like a week-to-week basis, just get to hear about the guy all the time and stuff like that, all the podcasts and everything continuing to go on. And just, But it's, again, Kevin Smith boiled down is our generation Stan Lee in many respects. He is. And again, I feel it's so appropriate given how close he was to the man. Again, he's practically his son, as we kind of learned during kind of his eulogy for the man. It was, I hope I'm not speaking out of term with that. It's just, he did feel like kind of like our generation's, like he was the touchstone. He's the generalissimo of comics. He's the ambassador of comics, but also ambassador of film and ambassador of the 90s, ambassador of our past in many respects. He was the closest thing we have to that touchstone who's kind of grown with us like, we didn't have a Stan Lee going back in the day. You know, I mean, like, we've kind of had Stan Lee going. You know, I mean, we've had Stan Lee
Yeah.
going forward. We weren't there at the inception. We were kind of there at the inception for Kevin Smith, which feels kind of special. So I think we've talked about quite the evolution and self-reflective journey he's been on. He's at a point where he's trying not to repeat himself, and he's kind of grown with the times. And, you know, it's always been an honest reflection, staying true to what he likes, which is making movies with his friends. Very Kermit the Frog of him. And that he's made movies and stuff along the way with for many years. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I can wish him the happiest of happy birthdays. Gotta love the man. 50 years going strong. Thank you, Kevin Smith.
30